Hello y'all, hope you're all doing well. This is RJ here in Winchester, Virginia for the annual memorial service that has taken place every year, usually on June 6th, since 1866. So just about 160 years now. The service is just about to start. The annual ceremony is just about to start. It's a beautiful shot. I wanted to share this with you. Here in Stonewall Cemetery, which is within Hebron Cemetery, there's just about between 2,600 to 3,000 Southern Americans who fought the Confederacy that are buried right here. About 800 are unknown and buried in a mass grave right at the base of this beautiful memorial that's right over here. So it's supposed to start at the top of the hour. It's a little bit over because there was a massive rainstorm that just hit. And thankfully it's cleared up. Of course, you can see the aftermath of the storm. There was a nice rainbow back there just a little bit ago. But the ceremony is just about to begin. So I figure I'll keep this on and I'll share this with you. And I'll do my best I can to be able to get close to the speaker so you can hear the ceremony today. I know you'd love to come out here. I know the rains will have kept the crowds down because it has been very stormy. I-81 is a mess right now. I pulled off earlier and it's just it's awful right now on I-81. But here in Winchester, this is an independent city. Just about 25,000 folks. It's a very historic city. Definitely a place you want to stop by and visit sometime if you're around here. Not only this very important Confederate cemetery right here, where there is about between 2,600 to 3,000 Southern Americans, Confederates that are buried here. About 800 buried in a mass grave, and a mass grave at the base of this beautiful memorial right here in the middle. But Winchester, if you ever come through here, definitely a lot of things to see. So for example, the headquarters of General Stonewall Jackson is definitely highly recommended. They haven't gone too woke. They're sharing very important artifacts and relics of General Stonewall Jackson. He's headquartered there. There's also George Washington was a surveyor here. It was the place that he used along the way. The Hunter Holmes McGuire, right? General Jackson's famous surgeon who became president of the American Medical Association. He was incredibly born and died in the exact same house. He died in this exact same house he was born in here in Winchester. Incredible. While I'm here, I'm gonna make a transition real soon, but while I'm here, I might as well share this with you. And that is the grave markers of those famous knights, Black Knight, the Ashby brothers Ashby. You can read about them. Turner Ashby, in fact, they are the namesake of the SCV camp that is hosting this memorial service right now. This is being hosted by the Turner Ashby Sons of Confederate Veterans. I encourage you to follow them. I really appreciate their efforts. And look how beautiful this is. Look how beautiful it is here today. And of course, I don't want to overlook another notable, famous headstone right here, the Pattons. Colonel George Patton, as you see right here, the namesake and the grandfather of that famous World War II general, George Patton. There's a photo of George Patton when he was much younger, I believe a cadet. He was standing right here beside the gravesite of his marker, of his grandfather, who was killed in the war. Not only his father, but his father's brother, so his grand uncle as well. And here lies asleep in one grave, the Patton brothers. As you know, it's pretty common for for many of those famous generals in the U.S. Army. They revered, heard stories, learned from their Confederate ancestors, including, of course, this George Patton, including those like the most decorated Marine in U.S. history, Chesty, as you know, General Chesty Puller. I finally found his Confederate grandfather's gravesite not too long ago. I also love this. In honor of the women of Winchester. Isn't that cool? Nice color memorial right there. It's a beautiful scene right here. The ceremony is going to begin here real soon. I want to be able to share this with you. So this is a Confederate cemetery that is very unique, and they're all special. They're all hallowed grounds. This one is particularly unique because not only is there a beautiful memorial right in the middle representing those who are the unknown, the 800 that are buried that are unknown, but every single state, almost every state is represented here. This is all these burials were all those who were buried here were buried by state, and every state has their own obelisk, their own memorial. So you can see South Carolina over here, South Carolina flag. You see the North Carolina right over here. Over here you see Maryland. You see Texas right over here. Alabama, see Louisiana. See Tennessee. Every single state has their own memorial. So I'm gonna make a transition here real soon. But before I do, I want to at least capture a little quick video here. I've got another camera on here. And then I'm gonna go over to the ceremony, the service. The annual service is just about to begin. Once again, this is following a major storm that came through here just about an hour ago. There was thunder and lightning. It's pouring down heavy. So I'm going to make a transition over now to the ceremony. This is the 159th annual Confederate Memorial Day. We're going to begin with prayer.
Now, can I have Gunner and Kimber and Landon? And if you'll direct your attention, we're going to go ahead and lay our wreath at the unknown monument. So if you guys can come forward. right ahead. All right, well done. Well done, thank you. Looks beautiful. All right, we're gonna go ahead and begin with our salute to our flags. If I can have Miss Darcy Carpenter come on up, and also past Commander Art Cadenquist.
Salute to the Virginia flag. I salute the flag of Virginia with reverence and patriotic devotion to the mother of states and statesmen, which it represents, the Old Dominion, where liberty and independence were born.
I salute the Confederate flag. Attention, reverence,
Undying devotion. Temples with the stands.
Now I'll read our SCV charge. And of course, this is by Lieutenant General Stephen Dill Lee, Commanding General, United Confederate Veterans in New Orleans in 1906. To you, sons of Confederate veterans, we commit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles he loved and which made him glorious and which you also cherish. Remember, it is your duty to see that the true history of the South is presented to future generations. Now have the soldiers of the 10th Virginia post the colors. Well, thank you. You folks can be seated. You know, it's such a relief. I'm sure a lot of people feel it. To me personally, it's a relief to be amongst these soldiers. It's kind of strange saying that because it is a cemetery, but I've always kind of felt a special connection to cemeteries. But this cemetery is special. It holds our righteous dead. And why do I say they're righteous? It's because they were righteous for God, not for self. And that's why what we do here for these soldiers is pleasing to God in heaven. And what we do for them to hold this memorial event every year to honor them, we don't do it for ourselves. It's for His glory. And that is what will sustain us in the future as descendants of these men That's what will be vindicated. Righteousness in the sight of God. So that connection to these men must be maintained by all of us. So that what we labor for to honor these soldiers continues to be a blessing. It's why God protects this place. It's why they lie here at peace, unmolested for 159 years. It's why it feels good to be here. These men didn't die in vain. These men died not just for their states, and there's every state represented here: Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, Florida, Arkansas, Texas, Tennessee, Maryland, Mississippi, Georgia, Kentucky, Delaware, and I actually like to add Missouri and parts of the Arizona territory. These men didn't just die to defend their homes, their lands, their families. They laid down their lives for love of their brothers. As we've been taught, that greater love hath no man than this, that a man laid down his life for his friends. That's why we tend to them. That's why we labor. Why what we must do continue in this peaceful place of Stonewall Cemetery. It's then, and only then, why the blessings from God will continue to fall on us. That's why we wait patiently, and in suffering, sometimes very little help, alone. Even as our culture today is assaulted from within, our own country, that's why we wait. Even as our history and heritage is attacked, why our faith is persecuted, and false righteousness spreads. We wait patiently because we will be vindicated. So be patient. Don't waver for their sakes. I'd be remiss if I didn't recall that 163 years ago on this day, Brigadier General Turner Ashby fell in battle, and he lies just over there alongside his brother Richard, also killed in battle. This great knight of the valley and commander of Jackson's cavalry lies at the head of more than 3,000 known and unknown Confederate dead and our ancestors. In May of 1865, Mrs. Philip Williams of Winchester was deeply disturbed upon learning that local farmers had begun to plow up Confederate remains as they prepared for spring planting. Williams and other Winchester women determined to organize a memorial association to gather all of the Confederate remains within a 12 to 15 mile radius and inter them in a central location. The women also proposed a plan to have annual gatherings to place flowers on the graves and celebrate the deeds of the fallen. And it's out of their efforts came this Stonewall Cemetery and our Confederate Day Memorial Service so long ago. So on behalf of the compatriots of Turner Ashby Camp 1567, Sons of Confederate Veterans of Winchester, Virginia, I welcome you to the continuation of that service, which the women of Winchester planned and implemented all those years ago, 128 years ago to be exact. So our speaker for this evening is Mr. Stephen Lee Ritchie. Let me introduce him. He holds degrees in both U.S. history and U.S. government from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. Steve's a former staff historian for the Civil War Education Association, historian of the Civil War Institute at Shenandoah University here in Winchester, co-director, vice president of the Robert E. Lee Fellowship. He's an award-winning historian. In 1998, he was honored to be presented with the Jefferson Davis Historical Gold Medal by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And in 2013, the Dr. William Woods Hassler Award for Civil War Studies by the Civil War Education Association, and in 2014, Robert E. Lee Gold Medal by the Sons of Confederate Veteran, which is the second highest award given by that organization. He's a past commander, division commander, and adjutant-in-chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. He's proud to have roots deep in the soil of the Shenandoah Valley, and he's also a member of the Colonel D.H. Lee March Camp number 10 of Harrisonburg. And let me introduce his topic for tonight. It's the cause of the war to prevent Southern independence. And I'll just kind of tee this up a little bit. The 150 years since the end of the war to prevent Southern independence have produced numerous claimed reasons for a war that changed our country forever. In the quest to prove a point, rather than logically assess the issues, the one simple cause of this war has been ignored. But Northern and Southern partisans share guilt in this situation, but since it is true that, quote, the victors write the history, joined with the current ignorance of political correctness, the Northern claims have the distinction of being the most visible and consequently the most wrong. This presentation will examine the most egregious of these claims and seek to explain the simple truth of a needless war. So with that, I present Mr. Steve Ritchie.
Thank you all very much. I want to thank you all for being here this evening, for riding to the sound of the guns. I swear I heard the guns. I sat over here in my car for about 2 hours before we got started. I sure heard something. I thought it was guns. It may have been some other sound that emanated from the heavens. But I want to thank you all for being here. As we talked earlier, underneath the tent over here, our ancestors couldn't call it a rain out, so it wouldn't hardly be acceptable if we had done that either. And I'm glad we're able to gather here today. I don't want to sound like an old friend of mine, Bud Hall, and go into many introductions of all the friends that I have seen at this event. I appreciate so much, so many of you coming over to say hello. But I do have to mention one in particular, one of my very oldest and dearest friends, Past Commander Art Condenquist, who I didn't even realize was here until he walked up here a few minutes ago. I haven't seen Art in so long. We've known each other for 40 years. It's hard to believe. We were just children, of course, when we met, but it's been 40 years. We gather here each year on the anniversary of the death of General Turner Ashby, not as much to honor his life and sacrifice, but to honor the thousands of common soldiers who lie here. Common men who answered the call to leave the warmth of hearth and the work of their hands for one common reason. From varied background and station to take up arms for one sacred cause. And it's that one cause that I want to present to you this evening. As an educator, I've often heard that no one teaches without bias. It's human nature. We all have our positions, our preferences, our points of view. The best we can do is to do our best to make sure that our positions are all well supported, not with endless opinions, but with facts. Bill O'Reilly once had a show on Fox News, which he recognized with the phrase the no spin zone. As referenced, spin is very much a part of our lives and nearly unavoidable. It's part of our nature. Even for the most well-intentioned, we have a tendency to bend facts to support our own points of view. I once heard of a man who was so embarrassed that his grandfather had been hanged as a horse thief that in repeating the story, he merely said that his grandfather had died at a public ceremony when the platform on which he was standing gave way. Now, certainly that's a true statement, but admittedly, some of the pertinent information has been omitted from that story. That's called spin. In the past, those of us who actually know history have accepted spin concerning the cause of this war by saying, oh well, the victors write the history. But the current climate involving the war to prevent Southern independence has gone considerably beyond spin to encompass outright ignorance. In analysis of the pre-Civil War culture, certain war causes have been advanced. Certainly, the most listed cause of the war against Southern independence is slavery. During most of the British colonial period, slavery existed in all of the colonies. People enslaved in the North typically worked as house servants, artisans, laborers, craftsmen, with a greater number in cities. As the North became more industrialized and the South continued to be agrarian, the active practice of slave labor moved south, although slaves continued to be found in northern states. The agricultural South had a significantly higher proportion of slaves in the population, as its commodity crops were more labor intensive. Northern states with less of a slave population still responded to what they felt was a cultural problem in regard to Africans. Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Oregon banned immigration to their states by any black person, slave or free. Indiana wrote that restriction into their state constitution in 1850. What's most amazing is it was not removed until 1888. Pennsylvania Congressman David Wilmot proclaimed that, quote, the Negro race already occupies enough of this fair continent. On October 13th, 1858, Abraham Lincoln said, I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. In August 1862, Lincoln wrote to editor Horace Greeley, his objective in the war was to save the Union without freeing a single slave, if he could do it. Lincoln claimed that the two races could not live together, and his plan for freed blacks involved colonization to foreign countries. In Lincoln's opinion, the Caribbean and Central America had a similar climate to Africa, and at the time of his death, he was involved in negotiations with Great Britain to move blacks from this country to the island of Belize, to the country of Belize in the Caribbean. It must be clearly stated that in spite of all the debate and emotional turmoil in the early 1860s regarding African nationals, slavery was not the cause of the war. The U.S. Congress, who funded this war, passed the Crittenden-Johnson resolutions, also called the War Aims Resolution, on July the 25th, 1861, 121-2 in the House, 30-5 in the Senate. It was not a close vote in either house. And it declared that the war was not about slavery, but about union. President Lincoln, who had perpetrated the war, stated repeatedly that his purpose in pursuing the conflict was not to free the slave, but to preserve the Union. The fact that even the words of the man in charge of the Northern war effort are not accepted as fact to this day is further testimony of the power of propaganda. How then has slavery floated to the top as the cause of the war? In discussion of the war, it's often the case that the northern invasion of the South is pictured as an act of moral purity to free the slaves. Any honest investigation of the historical records demonstrate that this is simply not true. Why then is it perceived as truth? Perhaps the words of Stanton native President Woodrow Wilson provide an answer. It was necessary to put the South at a moral disadvantage by transforming the contest from a war waged against states fighting for their independence into a war against states fighting for the maintenance and extension of slavery. If slavery were the critical issue, the South had no reason to secede, since the Constitution of the United States protected the institution of slavery in 3 different places. It simply makes no sense at all to claim that slavery was the cause of the war. Another war issue has been identified as federal tariffs. Prior to the War of 1812, federal tariffs on imported goods were modest, although they were the only source of federal income. Imagine a world with no income tax. What a wonderful place it must have been. Following the War of 1812, developed the concept of protectionism. Protectionist tariffs. You may have heard that phrase somewhere recently. To discourage the importation of goods that could be produced here at home. On May the 19th, 1828, Congress adopted what came to be called the Tariff of Abominations. That tariff raised the average duties on goods to be imported into the United States to 50%. This action had an especially adverse effect on the economy of the South. The British, for example, faced with a reduced market for their goods in the United States due to the tariff, slowed their purchase of cotton, which weakened the Southern economy. Southern states contended that the tariff was unconstitutional, and thus they were opposed to these new protectionist tariffs. However, New England's industrialized states favored these higher tariffs for their protection of their products and the revenue that was produced, which was used to build the northern infrastructure. Federal tariffs were therefore a grievance to the southern states. It was certainly most disturbing to Southerners when early in his campaign for President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln declared his support for such tariffs, resulting in him not being placed on the ballots in several southern states. These tariffs were opposed by the southern states and seemingly supported by the northern states. And yet tariffs were not the cause of this war. Another oft-mentioned cause is secession. The history of secession is well documented in this country. And yet one historical reality is often overlooked in the discussion. The first American secessionists were disgruntled New Englanders who threatened to leave the Union rather than continue to participate in the War of 1812. Secession again was seriously discussed, as we all know, in the mid-1800s. The sovereign states had created the Union for the purpose of commerce and common defense. All of the sovereign states. These states, all of the states, reasoned that since they had entered into this union of their own free will, they were entitled to leave the very same way. This view was espoused in William Rawls's view of the Constitution, which was the constitutional textbook at the United States Military Academy. It was also supported by Congressman Abraham Lincoln, who stated on January 12, 1848, "Any people, anywhere, being inclined and having the power, have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and form a new one that suits them better." This is a most valuable, a most sacred right, a right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world. South Carolina left the Union. They had voluntarily joined on December the 20th, 1860. Mississippi on January 9th, Florida on January 10th, Alabama on January 11th, Georgia on January 19th, and Louisiana on January 26th, and Texas on February 23rd. I will make note at this point that opposition to northern coercion was not isolated just in the South, but also existed in the North. I give you the little community of Bogstown, Indiana, which passed an ordinance of secession on February the 16th, 1861. If the northern bureaucracy continued their policy of coercion of the southern states, Bogstown intended to secede, I proudly say. On February 18th, 1861, Jefferson Davis was inaugurated as the first president of the Confederate States of America. Following the ceremony, the new president spoke to the crowd. Our present political position has been achieved in a manner unprecedented in the history of nations. It illustrates the American idea that governments rest on the consent of the governed, and that it is the right of the governed and then the right of the people to alter or abolish them at will, whenever they become destructive of the ends for which they were established. On April 15th, Abraham Lincoln called on the states to provide 75,000 volunteers to invade the South. Within 2 days, the Virginia delegates were recalled to Richmond, and they reversed their previous decision against secession and voted to leave the federal union on April the 17th. Arkansas followed suit, seceded on May the 6th, North Carolina on May the 20th, and Tennessee on June the 8th. The governors of each of these states contacted the President of the United States and made it clear that their states had seceded because he called for volunteers and was planning an invasion. Secession, therefore, is an historical reality, but secession was not the cause of the war. The Confederate States planned no invasion of the North. The Confederate States planned no storming of the White House to remove Mr. Lincoln. The Confederate States planned no great movement of troops across the Mason-Dixon line. The Confederate States planned no massacre of congressmen or senators as expressed in the United States government. The greatest desire of the Confederate States, as expressed by President Jefferson Davis, was to be, quote, left alone. Another cause of the war is often mentioned as the firing on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. As the southern states left the Union, the fate of the federal facilities in the South became an issue. Most of these were surrendered to the state in which they were located, and federal forces left peaceably. But in Charleston, South Carolina, 82 federal soldiers abandoned their mainland posts in favor of the offshore fortification, Fort Sumter. On December 9th, 1860, Southern representatives assured President Buchanan that Sumter would not be attacked as long as it was not reinforced and as long as it made no aggressive moves toward the state of South Carolina. On December 12th, Lincoln expressed his intention to hold or retake federal facilities, specifically tariff collection points, which Fort Sumter was, in the South after his March 4th inauguration. On March 9th, Lincoln proposed to his cabinet that Fort Sumter be reinforced, not resupplied, reinforced. On April 4th, 1861, the U.S. Commander of the Army, General Winfield Scott, issued an order stating, "This will be handed to by Captain G.V. Fox, an ex-officer of the Navy. He is charged by authority here with the command of an expedition under cover of certain ships of war whose objective is to reinforce Fort Sumter." While all the while, Confederate peace commissioners were being assured that Sumter would be evacuated. not reinforced. By April 11th, warships of the Union Reinforcement Squadron could be seen sailing into Charleston Harbor. At 3:20 a.m. on the morning of April 12th, Confederate batteries began firing at the fort. President Lincoln sent a personal letter of congratulations to Captain Gustavus Fox, saying, "Our mission has been accomplished." Following the Fort Sumter incident, President Davis told his cabinet the order for sending of the fleet was a declaration of war. The responsibility is on their shoulders, not ours. A deadly weapon had been aimed at our heart. The assault has been made. Yet, even with these presidential words, this event, a skirmish at best, was not the cause of the war. All federal troops withdrew by transport to the Union flotilla. This bloodless event could have stopped there, a mere footnote in history. One other, and the last cause that I will cover, has been mentioned. Lincoln's call for 75,000 volunteers. Lincoln used the events of Fort Sumter to rally Northern patriotism. He spoke of the half-starved defenders of the fort standing against overwhelming Southern forces to protect the flag, when in fact the fort was very well provisioned, and they did not stand against the Southern forces. They didn't fire a shot. Lincoln's call actually had counterproductive results, as mentioned previously. Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee all seceded and joined the Confederacy. Governor Ellis of North Carolina sent this word to Lincoln: "North Carolina will be no part to this wicked violation of the laws of the country, and this war upon the liberties of a free people." We've mentioned many things this evening, yet the main question still remains: what was the cause of the war to prevent Southern independence? It was not slavery. It was not tariffs. It was not secession. It was not the firing on Fort Sumter. It was not Lincoln's call for 75,000 volunteers to invade the South. All of these could exist as historical realities without the deaths of over 620,000 young men on the field of battle, without the burning of Southern cities, without the murder of Southern civilians, without the destruction of a noble culture, without the horrors of Reconstruction. The cause of the war to prevent Southern independence was only one thing. The one thing that every one of these men who lie here fought for, or in this case, fought against: invasion. So simple, such a simple explanation that could have been so simply avoided. Invasion. That was the offense. that could not go unnoticed and remain just a footnote in history. On July the 18th, 1861, the Union Army, 37,000 strong, marched south into Virginia. A reporter for the Washington Star described the spectacle. The scene from the hills was grand. Regiment after regiment was seen coming along the road and across the long bridge, their arms gleaming in the sun. Cheer after cheer was heard as regiment greeted regiment. And this with the martial music and sharp, clear orders of commanding officers made a combination of sounds very pleasant to the ear of a Union man. On the hill, in the middle of the southern line, a Virginia brigade commanded by Thomas J. Jackson. General Barnard B. of South Carolina shouted, "Look, there is Jackson and his Virginians," standing like a stone wall. Many of these men who lie here stood with Jackson like a stone wall. President Davis visited the field of battle. He told his defenders there, "Your little army, derided for its want of arms, derided for its lack of all the essential material of war, has met the grand army of the enemy, routed it at every point, and it now flies inglorious in retreat before our victorious columns. We've taught them a lesson in their invasion of the sacred soil of Virginia." Some 4,500 men were killed, wounded, or captured on both sides in the battle the North called Bull Run and the South called Manassas. The cause of the war is before us now. It was not slavery or tariffs or secession or the firing on Fort Sumter or Lincoln's call for 75,000 volunteers. All of these could have been historical realities without war. The one item that could not stand without a response was invasion. As soon as federal troops stepped forcefully into a sovereign South, they had started a war. And they could have ended it at any time. All they had to do was go home. A Union soldier once asked a captured Confederate, "Why are you fighting?" And the Confederate replied, "Because you are here. Because you are here." I offer this for your consideration. And I thank you for your very kind attention. Thank you.
Find my glasses. Can't see. Wow, that was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Steve. I'd like to go ahead and we'll do a sweet song here that we love and kind of a lot of emotion in it, but go ahead.
stepping away for just a moment from the annual ceremony. That's been 159th annual ceremony. Started way back in 1866 here in Stonewall Cemetery here in Winchester, Virginia. We'll go ahead and return to the ceremony now.
Thank you. I just think that it's always good to give peace, and I think it's very appropriate. I think probably these men already might appreciate that call. Look, I wanted to thank everybody for coming and braving the storm and sticking it out. I think just before the storm, I didn't think we were going to have it, and maybe we might get 10 people here. So I appreciate everybody for coming out. I just want to remind everybody of some of the numbers here real quick. But there are 2,494 Confederate dead buried in these grounds right amongst us. And I just want to call out each state and the numbers for each state. North Carolina had 447. Virginia has 394. Georgia 289. South Carolina 148. Alabama 72. Louisiana 69. Mississippi 66. Florida 38. Tennessee 29. Maryland 13. Texas 5. Kentucky 3, and 1 from Delaware. And I'd like to leave you all with a poem that was written by a soldier sometime after the war. Yes, give me the land where the ruins are spread and the living tread light on the heart of the dead. Yes, give me the land that is blessed by the dust and bright with the deeds of the downtrodden just. Yes, give me the land where the battle's red blast has flashed of the future, the form of the past. And yes, give me the land that hath legends and lays that tell of the memories of long vanished days. Yes, give me the land that hath story and song to tell of the strife of the right with the wrong. Yes, give me the land with a grave in each spot and the names in the graves that shall not be forgot. Yes, give me the land of the wreck and the tomb. There's grandeur in graves, there's glory in gloom. For out of the gloom, future brightness is born, as after the night looms the sunrise of morn. And the graves of the dead with the grass overgrown may yet form the footstool of the liberty's throne. And each simple wreck in the way path of might shall yet be a rock in the temple of right. Let's all go ahead and stand, and if we can, sing Dixie. And we'll do this a cappella because we don't have a band, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and lead off. I wish I was in the land of cotton. No times here are not forgotten.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland where I was born in early young frosty morning. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Well, I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hurrah. On Dixieland I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie.
Thank you.
Woo!
My voice didn't completely crack. Would you, this concludes our program. So I'd like to go now to our benediction Chaplain Simmons will lead that. Thank you.
The ceremony, the annual ceremony, is concluding right now here in Winchester, Virginia, at Stonewall Cemetery. That's located within Hebron Cemetery. So once again, here at the 159th annual Confederate Memorial Day service, hosted by the Turner Ashby Camp. It had been hosted by the UDC for all those many decades. You know, it's turned over to the SCV camp just last year. So this is the second time they've held it. They've done a wonderful job. It's a beautiful cemetery. All right, so glad you can join me today. Join us all. I encourage you to come out when possible here to this hallowed grounds here in Winchester, Virginia, here in Stonewall Cemetery. There's about 26 to 3,000 Southern Americans that are buried here. May God bless and save the South.